Hello, Martin. Welcome to episode 57 of Illuminating Rounds. Back after a little break. How you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. Yeah, I've been relegated to upstairs temporarily. So I've
Right.
had to put the screen on blur because we keep the old lodger over there, the one who left a couple of years ago. Didn't want him to show up really.
Oh well. Okay. So it's all
How about
okay.
you? You good?
I am good, thank you. Yeah, we've been both very busy. Very exciting news. The first bit of exciting news. There's many bits of exciting news today.
There is.
First bit of exciting news is my internet has been upgraded. So I mean, honestly, I'm on 500 meg. Oh, it's life is good. Suddenly things work, things download. I can upload files to YouTube, which means we can do more live videos.
Yeah.
That's the key thing. So if anyone has an interest in seeing a particular scenario that they think might be suitable for a live play, give us a shout and we'll set one of those up. I'm sure you're up for it, Martin.
Absolutely, with your effortless bandwidth,
It will be.
We'll be steaming through them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No jittering, no stuttering will be great. High definition uploads will be great. That's the first bit of news. Second bit of news is we have a new Patreon. So Hank, thank you very much, Hank, for joining. We always appreciate it. And if only we could demonstrate a nice coffee cup that we could potentially give Hank. So patrons, they know they can get a coffee cup. Might look a little bit like this, Martin. Look.
Oh, you've got one.
Oh, it's too hot. So I have gone.
The image on the other side.
Okay, so now it's not amazing, but it's there. You can see a little illuminating rounds there.
That is subtle.
It is subtle, and it's back to front for people that will be viewing at home.
Yeah.
But it's there on both sides. It's that I don't think you want to shout about your illuminating rounds, love of illuminating rounds on the train or whatever. So here they are. They come with a nice top and bits and pieces. I'll be bringing these to Blackpool next week because that's
a sit-on lid sort of thing. It's not suitable to sort of carry in the car.
No, it does. There's a stop lid with a little slidey thing on there as well. So I should be doing my QVC kind of look at this buy now for a thing. So yeah, Patreons. Sorry.
Carry on, Dave.
Okay, I was going to say, Patreons, give us a shout if you want to. We're going to offer these to Patreons until the end of the year, and then if we have any left, we will offer them up to everybody else. Patrons can get a discount for their monthly subscription. Just get in touch, and we've already got rid of a few. I say got rid of, passed on, sold, shipping them as we speak. So a few people have been in touch already. So thank you. We're going to see these around the world, no doubt. I would say suitable to put next to an ASL board, but even with a lid, I'm not so sure I'd feel that comfortable. But
I think we've had specific instructions from Martin Mayers with the tournament this weekend to. Well, he says I won't tell adults what to do, but probably best if you don't keep your coffee on the tables.
It's probably a fair point. He's thinking about 60 people potentially, which I don't know if that's a world record for.
Well, it wouldn't be the biggest ASL tournament, I don't think, in UK, but it would certainly be much bigger than the Blackpool tournaments traditionally have been.
Has there been one with more than 60 then, do you think, in the UK?
Well, I think in the early days when I first was going to Bournemouth, I think it must have been close to that number.
Okay.
I have no idea what the number was.
Okay.
I remember them being quite substantial tournaments.
Excellent.
60 is a lot of people.
Yes, it is. It is.
I mean, none of us that thin these days. You know what I mean? It's almost like 120 guys, really, isn't it? 120 normal guys.
Yeah, there's something like, what is it? 300 portage points of guys walking around. Certainly in terms of their stuff that we're bringing. Okay, so that's happening this Thursday. So Thursday is it the 18th-ish of November?
Yeah,
so this will be out before then. So we're both going to be there. Both excited. I'm in the tournament. You are going to be playing pickup games. Maybe the last time that you can not be in the tournament because your teaching commitments will end.
Evaporate. Yeah. No, I told well, next year I'm going to be there before the tournament organizer. I'm going to be first there. Yeah.
Brilliant. Right. Okay. In other news, I went to the Alpenfestung tournament, so I'm going to give you a quick tournament report of that. So Alpenfestung is an amazing tournament that Mark Bloom runs. He runs in Switzerland, and it's an incredible chance. I said to him this week, when I was there a couple of weeks ago, it's like a retreat. It's like a detox of everything with a little bit of ASL thrown into it. So it's very different to most tournaments that we've played in the past, where he will break in the middle of a game for a hike. and literally, we all put our stuff down, and off we go on a hike. So there was 4 of us. You have to win a dice roll to get in, like a random selection. So that's the first hurdle you have to cross. Then you have to do your COVID tests and your everything else to get into Switzerland. Create your COVID passport. The Swiss charge you 30 francs to have a passport that lets you into cafes and things. So it was a bit tricky. Anyway, so I played 3 games there. I played a guy called Frank. Frank was an incredible character. He was the type of guy that makes any scenario a huge amount of fun. Loud, boisterous, energetic, very harsh on himself, fairly new player as well. I've never played such a good new player. So he said to me, he'd only read half of Chapter K, and he's obviously played a few games as well, but he's only read half of Chapter K, and that's been pretty much his learning for ASL. He played a very, very good game, really strong, and he was really strict on himself. So, for example, as we've done many times, we've forgotten to move units and bits and pieces, even a turn later, and we've look, just move them now, whatever. Frank was absolutely didn't want any, no quarter asked or given, but he was certainly no quarter asked was definitely his thing, where he just was brutally, brutal to himself. And we had an interesting game, an interesting point in the game, because we were playing Labard's Charade, and it's got so he was the French with the one-man tanks defending the open ground before the Germans kind of run across, and it's a challenging situation because obviously if you go CE with the tanks, they can't fire bits and pieces. And in one part of the game, he struggled with his tanks. He had one on his own, platoon movement failed, needed to get it round the back of a village, and so he went crew exposed, comes round the back of the village, in a nice move, parks on the road. Obviously can't go buttoned up at that point in the turn, would need to wait until the advance phase to button up. But of course we've kind of forgotten, and there's a turret counter on top, and everyone's just forgotten. Anyway, he's had a shot on my tank in the advancing fire phase, which technically shouldn't have happened. And he rolls a depletion number on his armor piercing. So we kind of joke about the fact that, okay, he's got no armor piercing now. There's very little chance of him destroying this tank of mine. But we move on, and we've forgotten all about it. And then I go to fire at him in my prep fire phase, and I'm thinking about whether I should fire at his tank. And then we realise it was crew exposed. So now this is a little bit tricky, because if we allow him to have taken the shot, which would, I would have been happy if he'd have taken the shot and killed me. I wouldn't have flipped the tank back over again. But then we also, in theory, should have to have him double penalised, because now he's run out of AP and he can't fire at me in my movement phase if I run the tank back. So it's all a bit tricky to know what the best outcome, what the best thing to do is. So, in theory, A.2, we just move on and we just accept it, and that's what it is. But it did feel very harsh, because suddenly now there's this tank that, in theory, if you and I were playing, we would have just buttoned it up and said, look, the shot's happened, whatever, you've lost your AP, but you can still, still fire HE or whatever. But Frank was very much like he wanted to play by the rules, and he was, very, very good in that way. So my tank kind of came around and destroyed it, and that made the game a lot easier to the end. So I beat Frank, but it was a fun play. I've never met anybody more happy to have a leader become heroic. Frank was singing and he was dancing and everything. The next morale check, he fails the morale check, he wounds. He didn't die, but he was struggling. It was very, very good. So good fun scenario, and I won that. And I had to play John Tate, and we played It Don't Come Easy. It's a big deluxe scenario where the American paratroopers are defending against a very wide German attack, and the Germans have to get, I think it's something like 16 points or 14 points off the board, but they have to include one MMC, and they've got 3 tanks. And in the first turn, the sniper hits my bazooka squad, so my bazooka's down, which means his tank can just run straight, because deluxe boards, you can do the whole length of the board pretty much in a turn. So within a couple of turns, the tank's flown off, and then another tank goes off, so he only needs 2 points left. Then he gets a half squad. He's got 1 half squad left to get off at the end of the game, and he's got 4 potential half squads to do it. And he does the whole, just charge forward, and if any one of them passes the morale checks, they'll be fine. And every one of them he pins or breaks, and I get a bit lucky. And there was a route that he could have taken that would have avoided a lot of that. So I got a lucky win there. And then in the final, I have to play Mark Bloom, and we play Blooded, which is a nice PTO scenario. It's a very simple scenario from Rally Point. and it's basically the Japanese coming up over through a gully or a stream, up over a hill, and to move off. The Americans defending. And I thought I had this amazing move where he's got this big stack. You know, in the jungle, you don't really want to stack all of your big Marines in one nice stack against the Japanese. And so I managed to kind of surround it, and he's not taking any shots. And then I start assault moving my. There's a question here about whether it was okay. I think it's okay to assault move, keeping concealment with half squad with the demo charge down a road. So the first one is 2 because it's the forest or it's the path, but into the path, and then the next point to place the demo charge. Still keeping concealment. We're all a bit unsure about whether that keeps concealment. It's an assault move, advancing then assault move.
I think you do keep concealment.
Right. Anyway, so he has this like massive 22 flat shot or something, and I'm thinking, well, okay, it's okay as long as even if I break, I'm just going to stripe. It's not terrible. And I double 6 it, and I was like, I can't, this chance to get a demo charge off in this stack. And suddenly then, like, my forces just started to disintegrate around this big killer stack. So I just jumped into close combat, and it was a bit more of just desperation than anything else. And, he's got, I think it was something like 16 firepower points worth of stuff in this hex. And I've got, the usual kind of Japanese leader and a squad and a stripe squad and maybe a crew that's left over or something. And in the second melee, I jump in with another squad and we jump in. So my first melee, there's no ambush, and then I roll double 1 for the infiltration, destroy this massive stack. It's just absolutely brutal. And in our second one, I kind of laugh and say, well, I'll pay for that kind of thing, and roll it, and I get a double 6. I'm like, there we go. This is now a big problem because he can reposition and everything. And then Mark rolls a double 6 again. So we both rolled double 6 on this close combat. So I think we played this correctly, that I get to withdraw. I'm not quite certain about that, but I chose to withdraw. It was my turn, and he's obviously rolled the second double 6. So I can withdraw. I think I go off the board or 1 hex away from the board so I can get that off. And suddenly the game was won for me. So I won the tournament. Very nice prize. I got a nice diorama that Mark has painted himself. The French. I'm not sure. There's a couple of pictures. We had an amazing hike. We had a sauna in the room. I'm not so sure I would recommend saunas with ASL players, but John was an amazing sauna buddy. He gave me like a tutorial of how to enjoy a sauna and everything. So that was pretty good. I got the full experience. And the funny little story was, I said to John, okay, I'm going to go and put my trunks on. And he says, no, listen, in Germany, because John lives in Germany. In Germany, it's actually illegal to wear your trunks in a sauna. I thought, is that true? I don't know.
They are in Switzerland.
Well,
he's being a little bit forceful on this point, really, isn't he? He's not even in the country where.
I mean, apparently there's good reasons for why it is illegal to wear your shorts in a sauna. Yeah. So
I'm sure there's good reasons why I went to enforce that rule in Switzerland.
So it was brilliant because I'm sitting there and I'm English, I'm British, I'm sitting there with my towel around me and I'm kind of clutching my pearls. And John says to me, well, the proper way of doing this is, you put the heat right up and then you put the steam on and then you get a towel and so he gets his steam on and we're on 90 degrees heat and the steam's, everything's going. And then he whips his towel off and he gives me this. It's amazing. So that's a sauna experience apparently. But very, very good. Really had a good time. Walked up the steepest hill imaginable. And I remember giving my daughter no sympathy when she told me about her D.V. at Duke of Edinburgh, where they go out in the Peak District and the Lake District, walked up climb. And she talks about these hills being like 49 degrees and whatever it is, whatever. Well, mine must have been 84 degrees. I mean, so, and there's a picture here of me absolutely exhausted, just trying to get up this hill that everybody else just seemed to stroll up. But clearly didn't have enough puff in my lungs for it. It was just crazy. So a really good tournament, and thanks to Mark for hosting and allowing us to come and visit his beautiful country. It's an incredible place. The scenery there is brilliant. So
Absolutely, well, fantastic setting for a tournament.
Yeah.
So talking about tournaments, like you've got the play by email tournament is well in motion. Have we got many results in yet?
We've got a few. So yeah, so if you haven't sent your result through, let me know. If you have sent me a result, maybe just let me know again. I've got a couple of results in that I know about. You've just played your first game. How did that go?
I've just completed. Yeah, I've been playing all 4 games simultaneously. But the first one I finished today, yeah, or last night, yeah.
Okay. And that was against Tim, was it?
Yes.
And went okay.
Well, do you want? Am I
You
allowed
can
to say what happened?
say. Yeah, you can say.
Yeah, no, I didn't do very well. I lost. My only real regret with Tim, who was great, who was a really, really great opponent and really played well as well, was I don't feel I gave him a very competitive game, and that's kind of my sort of regret. You know, I never mind losing, but I would like to give him a bit of a tougher challenge. But yeah, but it was very interesting. It might be the second time ever I've played with paddies.
I think you've got to call them.
You've
got to call them our friends from Ireland now, haven't you? I don't think you can. So this is rice paddies, yeah.
These are rice paddies, yes. Sorry,
yeah.
I was working on a little bit of a joke myself about like having a paddy. I don't know whether.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but yeah.
John O'Reilly's going to furiously write us an email now.
It's racism.
I hope not. I hope it's not a derogatory term. Let's. I'll check it, and if it's.
I think it's I suppose it's short for Patrick, isn't it? I suppose the suggestion is that they're all called Patrick. Is that that must be the suggestion?
Well, I'm just going to check. I just want to make sure it's not offensive. All right, so
and we got a nice prize for that, haven't we?
We have. So Ian Willie has done an amazing job. We've got pictures of it here. This is the diorama that we'll be giving away to the winner.
It makes me wish I was a better player.
Do you know something? It's an amazing, or a better modeler, because we're both.
Yes.
There was I think
he inspired me. I was in Aldi and they were doing a special offer of these little boats for £5. So I bought one and I built it the other night when I was watching TV with Mum. And oh my god, in comparison to Willie's work of art, Ian Willie's work of art, this is just the most embarrassing 5-year-old effort.
Well, we've got to start somewhere. I mean, that's
exactly.
Yeah.
But I quite enjoyed doing it.
If you were a better diorama maker, it might bring into there's a great line from someone who said, I became a lot less competitive at sports when I realised you could buy trophies, and there's an element of that. If you can make dioramas like that, maybe you're not going to be as good a player. So okay, we've got a couple of things left to talk about today. So the first thing is we're going to talk about Gut Punch from Dispatches from the Bunker. So we have started playing that. It's quite a big scenario actually, and Joe Arthur recommended this, and it looks like quite interesting. It's definitely an interesting stuff. It felt a little bit. We'll talk about it as we set it up. Felt a little bit contrived is perhaps too strong a word, but forced in terms of forcing the battle to take place in 3 different parts. But that's actually quite an interesting way that scenarios don't often happen, because sometimes it's all in one area. And for a medium-sized scenario, this kind of forces the scenarios around. But the other part that we should be talking about and that we'll get very excited about is Jim Bishop's interview. So we're going to play at the end of, we're going to do first, I think we've done the first couple of turns of Gut Punch, which we'll talk through. And then afterwards, we're going to talk about, we'll talk to Jim about his blog and about his amazing article that he's just written on prisoners. So there's a link below now for his prisoner article. I mentioned this last time. If you haven't had a chance to check out Jim's blog or any of the work that he's done, it's incredible. The fact it only took him a couple of months or something to do this is incredible, because it really is. And I hope it does get.
I think he was in constant communication with other people, wasn't he? He did several Perisses for it. I believe he was, obviously, talking to different people who are considered rules gurus.
Yes.
To make sure he ironed out every single little nuance in those rules. Yeah.
So we're going to play that afterwards. It's about an hour long, so it's going to be quite a long chat, and obviously we hope to find some bits and pieces interesting. But let's take a look at Gut Punch. So Gut Punch. So this is Dispatches from the Bunker. This is number 141. And let's talk a little bit about what's going on here. So It's my first ever Dispatches from the Bunker that I played directly from their publication, so it's nice. I like the layout that they have for the scenario card and everything. It's very, very nice, and I'll put one of those up to so you can have a look at that. So let's look at the scenario itself. So we have Germans defending 3 factories, effectively. We've got a bunch of conscripts, not a lot of stuff really down here. We have an immobilized tiger that sits anywhere on. So yeah, so the obligation on the German is to have at least 1 anti-tank gun or tank or Panzerschreck on each board, and I've got to have 3. I think it's 3 squads as well, 3 or more squads or more on each board as well. So it kind of forces the battle to take place in 3, at least 3 different areas. And you have a similar restriction, don't you, Martin, coming on?
Yeah, so I have to, on the 3 boards, each board I have to enter with at least 3 tanks, at least 3 squads, and a leader. So again, I have to divide at least into 3 significant groups. Yeah.
Right. The wrecks are kind of placed sort of semi at random. There's going to be a bunch of them that come out here. I don't think they're going to have a huge effect on the game. It's quite unlikely that they're going to end up on the left-hand side of this board. And you have to make sure I'm basically out of all the buildings on the middle board, which is quite a tough ask.
It's quite a lot to do, but you are very, very poor quality. I think you've got a couple of good squads, haven't you, with 8 morale, but the rest are the vast majority of conscripts.
Exactly.
Having said that, you only have to be unbroken.
Yeah.
So if there must be no unbroken German squads in the 3 factories.
So yeah, in melee is or you can't just sneakily put me into melee to.
That wouldn't do it, not it alone. No. But do you know what? It's always difficult. It's always interesting taking factories because, unlike every other type of stone building, you're not safe when you get into the building. You don't get the free protection.
Exactly.
So basically, conscripts are not that much less effective than any other unit, apart from when they cower.
Yes.
When they're firing at something adjacent or whatever.
Exactly. Okay, so so in terms of there is a little bit of a kind of like a forceful nature in terms of making the battlefield split into 3, but like you say, it does keep it interesting as well. That's the other thing. So there's action going on in each space.
I quite like it when there's action going on in different places.
Yeah.
It did surprise me a bit that you didn't attempt to slow me much. I mean, I know we haven't watched it through, but you haven't set up to defend the board 47 at all. Have you?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So the basically the setup is I've got an anti-tank gun hidden in 47I8, and the idea there is we're going to try and boy sight it as you come through. Yeah. And my main plan is just
for that, though, am I?
Well, I mean that's it. The main plan is just to pull the guys back into the factories and just defend the factories, and that's that. Yeah. So we'll see how this goes. For those playing at home, I have a hip unit here and a hip unit here. Martin can't see these, so he doesn't know yet where they are. And we've got the hip 88 gun sitting here pointing at the entry hex.
Don't put this out. Publish this before we finish the scenario.
Yeah, you're gonna be watching this. Just look away now, Martin. Okay, so let's scan through and see what the plan is. I think you're now you're gonna have to shout and tell me where you're coming on if I miss you, because I can't necessarily see what's you're coming on the bottom here.
Yeah.
So yeah, on the bottom, and already here it's a little bit tricky for me because I haven't got very much here.
Yeah.
Just a few conscripts and the Panzerschreck that hopes to catch. Now the other restriction is you've got to have, is it all your tanks can't be destroyed or something like that?
That's right. I have to have at least 1 multi-man counter and 1 tank surviving at the end of the scenario.
You have 10 tanks. I mean, it's
9,
10.
It's 6, it's 7, it's 8, 9, 10. It's 10.
Yeah.
10 tanks and 12 squads. I should hopefully at least have a squad left.
Right, exactly.
But you have got an 88L, you've got Panzerschrecks, there's all sorts of
that's right.
stuff you got there.
That's right. So here we go with the first excitement. So the 88 reveals itself.
Yeah, I thought you'd have something hip over there, but I wasn't expecting the 88. I was a bit, Oh no, here we go.
So I hit without rate. It's a bore sighted location there.
Yeah.
And your guys
Excuse me.
are able to kind of survive.
Mhm.
So at this point, we intensive fire and miss.
Mhm.
And already I'm feeling like I'm in a bit of trouble. So
Mhm.
my big plan I was kind of hoping you were going to come on as riders, or you're going to be, doing something crazy, and I would just be able to just knock you off there.
Yeah.
Your tanks, meanwhile, park kindly in front of the
Yes.
gun. Now the problem here is, I know if I take the shot, I will kill this tank. But then
Clearly.
you've got, your entire Russian force is going to jump on top of this gun, and that's all I'm going to get out of it. So I figure
Yeah.
I can't take this shot just right now. And I mean, look at that as a great target. So you do a little bit of a recon by fire down here, and you try and pick up the bits and pieces. You're trying to fire.
Now, it's worth pointing out that the victory conditions are all buildings,
Yes, that's
so
right.
it's not just the factories.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
And because you've got hit squads, I'm kind of finding myself doing a little bit of a recce through some of these.
that's right. Now I do have to reveal them all. I think at the
Turn
start or the
4.
end, turn 4. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is a little bit of that going on. You return fire at the anti-tank gun. I'm going to do a bit more checking here. So, I mean, already...
First factory looks to be hanging on with the 88
right.
in it as well. Yeah.
That's right. So, yeah, so I think at the moment, I think this is looking okay for you at the moment. You're pretty much intact. Everything's kind of in place. So what do we have going on then? You're down the bottom here. You're advancing through. We've got that's a hit roll. Oh, this is my prep fire. Takes out your first tank.
Yeah.
And then we intensive fire against the assault engineers, and we break those guys. Then we throw the demo charge, the 6+1 throws a demo charge, breaks your guy here. Managed to break my guy as well, but I think that's a price
I
I'll
was
pay.
getting a bit worried though at this point, I have to say, because still got a good stack there, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you've got 9 turret bazooka
Yeah.
left there. Yeah. Start to pull back
Yeah.
into the factory. Oh, these are light woods, by the way, aren't they? Or pine woods, just in case.
They're pine, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. You get a bit of fire as I retreat out of here, and then you start to just try and do some. You find my dummies in Z17. I pull back, a little bit of repositioning.
Yeah.
And a little bit of routing going on. And so what's going on now? You've got some hits going on here. So presumably this is the tanks. Oh, down here.
Yeah.
So at the conscripts.
That's right. Yeah.
In comes the big. Is this an ISU? Big tank up here.
Yeah, I went that way to avoid the 88.
Right. Assault engineers coming backwards. Now the thing is, you only got 5.5 turns here, so I do feel like you're taking your time. This is my glorious chance to potentially take that tank out that I do with my Panzerfaust. In comes one of the is it an SU-76 or something? Comes in. And my Panzerschreck here takes the shot.
That's right. I wasn't expecting the Panzerschreck.
Yeah, but does not hit.
Correct. Yeah.
And then this Panzerfaust looks. This Panzerschreck feels a bit out of place now.
Yeah, yeah.
You do a
It's
nice.
quite a nice place for it initially.
Yeah, it was. I think I should have taken a shot. Potentially should have been there, right? Like maybe in D6,
Yeah.
and then it's going to block up one of the roads. To give you a bit
Mm.
of a problem. And there's a little bit of final fire there, but nothing going on.
Over.
Yeah, and you break those guys. So those guys are out now. This Panzerstreck is pretty much now out of the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've got to figure that out. So this is now up in the top. So this tank gets away, and I'm kind of thinking now. But luckily you've moved your infantry out of the way, so I can now take the shot with the anti-tank gun a little bit, feel a bit safer. And I think perhaps I should have taken the shot first on this F9.
Yeah.
Now
probably because you could have kept rate of fire or something.
Yes. Yeah. But I decided to hold off for this one here.
Yeah, I think I was lucky really that I didn't lose more, that you didn't fire earlier.
Right. Yeah. You definitely got away with it perhaps there.
I think so.
But I mean, thanks to my poor shot selection. But I think I was more keen on holding on to the gun because I've got ideas about pushing it back
exactly.
onto the middle board. So a little bit of routing going on. You're advancing.
Yeah, I'm hoping to take control of that gun.
Right,
but,
right.
I know that you have your own ideas about that.
We do, yeah, we do. We've got a close combat somewhere down here in D7.
Yep.
Which you can win comfortably. Sneaky move here. You gain concealment of the guys next to my broken guys.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's your turn pretty much up. So here, my turn. I'm going to try and retake that gun.
Yeah.
These guys here. Feels like a bit of a challenge, but we're going to do it. And that's where we've got to. That's exactly where we've got to. So we are on, defending turn 2. And we had to call it at that point for now.
Yeah.
We're going to do the second half for the next video. What's your thoughts so far?
I just felt like I was doing fine, and I do feel like I'm doing fine, but it does feel like just breaking into 2 more stone buildings is... And it feels also like I've got quite a lot to think about. Like, so you could literally have a half squad hit there, and okay, you'll have to reveal it turn 4, which will give me 1 turn to stop it being in that building at the end. Do you know what I mean? And that's not by any means the only that you could be there. You could. So I just feel like there's quite a lot of things for me to consider as well as getting into those stone buildings.
Yep.
I think if I get into them, and of course I can start to use the tanks quite aggressively as well.
Yep.
1 gun down, and I know you're going to move. You've been moving the other gun, but it might take a while for it to get into position.
Yeah, definitely.
I might be able to use I think I need to use the tanks very aggressively to get into those buildings.
Right, exactly.
That's
but
the plan, really.
It's a nice scenario, isn't it? It's a nice.
Excuse me. Yes, it is. Yeah.
So we're enjoying it. So this is nice. So we're going to have a chat about the dispatches next time. We're going to go through them a little bit more. Now let's talk about Jim. So Jim was brilliant. He came on and had a chat to us. So we're gonna play this. So here's our chat with Jim. Oh, and at the start, don't panic. I realised that I've cut off the top of our heads and the bottom of Jim's head. In a minute or two, that will sort itself out. Don't worry. But here's the interview with Jim. Okay, well, so let's say hi to Jim. So Jim, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you on. We're very excited. Tell us a bit about yourself. Tell us what's going on.
So I recently moved to Germany. Well, I say recently, but I moved to Germany, I guess 2 years ago now in January with my wife. My wife's work brought us here, and as a result of the move, I also got to retire at the ripe old age of 56.
Nice.
So I'm I'm basically what every man has ever aspired to be, a kept boy. My
Yeah.
wife goes to work each days, and I make the household run. My kids are all grown up and left.
Right.
I don't get to play as much ASL as I used to, but with the extra time, I've been using it to write and reach out and engage folks in the community, trying to help to bring us back together.
Okay. And what did you do before
so-
you retired? What did you do?
I work for my federal government as an intelligence analyst.
Ah.
I work primarily covering counterterrorism topics.
Wow, that's a pretty intense job.
Yeah, I mean, since I've stopped, my blood pressure is down, my glucose levels are down, I've lost weight, I sleep better at night. It's a pretty tough job. I mean, I did it going back to before 9/11, and so there's the guilt that comes with that, and nobody knows your successes, but everybody knows your failures. Lots of engagement with MI5 and MI6 on your side of the pond, and different foreign governments and people. But that's primarily what I did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So what about ASL? When did you get into that game?
Oh, wow. I started playing Squad Leader itself back at university. So that would be right around 1981. Before that, I played it a little bit with my younger brothers. One of our pastors had a copy of it. And I don't understand what it is about reverends and pastors and clergymen who play ASL, but it seems that there's a high propensity of them, right? Pretty high ratio. He had a game of Squad Leader, and my brother David and I would lay it out on the boards 1 through 4, and we would just drop counters on and make tank noises and machine gun noises, and generally play it, but didn't know much about it. And then in university, I worked through the GI, Cross of Iron, and up through that space with a guy who lived down the hall in my dormitory. I bought all of Squad Leader before I joined the Army in like 1983, 84. And I bought it all up through probably west of Alamein. But I never really got a chance to play it. And when I moved back home to Washington, D.C. in the early, like 91, I think it was, 92, I got ready to sell it all, but I went on to eBay to see if it was selling, and it was selling. And I was like, oh, wow, there's people must still be playing it. So I started looking for a local community of ASL players in Washington, D.C., and I came across the D.C. conscripts. And so I started playing games with there, and that's really when I started playing a lot of ASL. 100, 150 games a year. I got really fortunate in that Gary Fortenberry lived right near me, and we could play basically every week. On the weekends, working with him as we play tested his packs that he did, the Fortenberry boards. I've seen most of them in draft form. I helped him edit and take care of processes and pieces. I got to play test with the MMP at all of their playtest schedules and whatnot. And then Vassal was also becoming big at that time, and so I got to play a lot. So really, I probably played close to 3,000 games of ASL by now.
Wow.
It's been quite a bit. I don't know exactly. I keep these little, they're British, they're Moleskines, right? I think that's the way I pronounce them. These little black notebooks with the rubber bands on them. This is my latest one. It's a new one, so it's pretty empty to the inside, but I have 13 of these filled with notes on people that I've played, scenarios that I've played, outcomes, games, and each of those hold probably 100, 125 different games.
Do you log them on the archive as well?
I used to, but Roar, I've never really been fantastic about it. The archive, I've never really been fantastic about it. I love the work that you've done. It's just, for me, the notebooks are something tangible in my hands. I don't have to come home, and where I get really bad is coming home and trying to transcribe them all into the book, right? Mm-hmm. That I don't do very well, unfortunately. If I were better about it, that might make more sense. And it's kind of funny because I carry a Microsoft Surface Go with me everywhere I play now, rather than that. And so I'm starting to move more into transcribing my notes there. And it wouldn't take that much effort on my part to put them online, but I don't know, I just never get to it.
So we met at ASLOC, I think maybe 11 or so years ago. I think we had a very brief conversation at some point. Did you go to Aslak often? Is that something you try to get to?
So I haven't been to the last two, which really makes my heart hurt. I tried to go this year, but I just couldn't pull it off with some of the COVID realities of, quarantining on both ends of the trip, coming from Germany. But I have been to, I think, 15 or 16 in a row before the last two. I've already at least put on my calendar next year's ASLOC, and I'm hoping to go to that for sure. But I think there's no other tournament like ASLOC in terms of the ability to meet international players, meet the people that are primary to the scene in the U.S. and just the atmosphere at ASLOC I think is unparalleled by anything I've ever been to. And I've been to quite a few of them, especially since I've been to Europe. I'm getting to more and more. I was hoping to go this year to Intensifier, which is coming up here next month, but I don't think I'm going to make it. Primarily because I've already play tested most of those scenarios that I know are on the list, and it just feels unfair to go.
Well, okay, I would say to you, if that's the only reason you're not going, then go along. I mean, don't miss out.
Well, there's that, and then there's also Supporting Fire is the same weekend up in Sweden. Okay. I'd been invited to go up to there with them, so I committed to go up to Supporting Fire with Sweden this year. Next year, I'll probably definitely get to Intensive Fire. I'm hoping to get to Double One as well, because those are my big ones. And then I'm probably going to try to pick two more, maybe Italia ASL and something else. I don't know. I'd like to get up to near Bournemouth because I would love to visit the Bournemouth Museum. I've never been.
Yeah. I'm not sure they do the tournaments down there anymore. Martin, do you know if they're doing the Bournemouth ones anymore?
No, I think Intensify replaced the Bournemouth one, really. I think the hotel became too expensive, and I don't think they welcomed us quite as much as they had in the old days.
Yeah.
How far away can it really be? I mean, I know England is, in and of itself from one end to the other is probably a pretty big size island, but I mean, all of Germany is the size of Oregon, right? When you think about it.
Yeah, that's true. Do you plan to go to?
So all of.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Dave.
No, sorry. No, keep going.
No, I was just going to say, people, I mean, it's been my experience that many Europeans don't understand how big the U.S. is when you talk about, coast to coast, north to south. It's amazingly large. And so, and then obviously we don't have public transportation. We're pretty much tied to our cars and whatnot. So if someone says to me, it's like 3 hours away, it's like, okay, whatever. It's really not that big of a travel. Well, in the U.S., I mean, when I lived there, my office was 12 miles one way, and based on traffic and whatnot, that was a 45-minute ride each way.
Yeah.
So
it's pretty good. So I was going to say, are you planning to go to Copenhagen? That's one of the tougher tournaments in Europe that gets a lot of good press.
So I was at Copenhagen the last two, and I may go to Copenhagen again this year, but having been to two, I may opt to go to something I haven't been to. It'll just depend on how I feel or how it looks coming around in March.
Okay.
I have to really, as a kept man, I have to be really careful about putting my poor wife through too much with my travels and my spaces around and whatnot. She's generally very accommodating of it all, but there's still things that have to be done around our house, and when I'm not here to get them done, it can put her into hardship because she has to, work. Her job can have her working 14, 16-hour days, and leaving her without that support staff that I represent can be kind of hard on her. So I just have to figure it out. But I love the tournament. I think Michael and Bo do a great job. I have never had anything but good results when I've been there. I've enjoyed the people that I've met. The food is fantastic. Their venue is great. The scenario selections are pretty good. I can't say enough good things about the tournament. I really enjoyed it.
That's good.
What's the ASL scene like in Germany? Is that something you've engaged with?
So, I mean, I was hoping to get to Grenadier this year, but obviously that was canceled as a result of the bad weather. But down here in Stuttgart, where I live at, there's not really too many here. There's one gentleman who plays, and he's contacted me, but we haven't been able to sort that out yet. Lars Turing used to get down here relatively regularly because his work carries him down here, but he hasn't been around in a while, and we've never really hooked up. So I'm pretty much limited to Vasil.
Yeah.
And that just depends on, finding people that are willing to play and matching up time zones, which, can be challenging, but not bad. and learn the language, right?
I'm sure you'll get plenty of offers after this. I'm sure that if because I know you're a very strong player, so it's people
I'm not as strong as I used to be because I haven't played as much, and frankly, I don't play as intensely as I used to because I'm more about, at this point in my life, I'd rather meet and play people that I've never played before, and have a good time. And then I've also been doing a lot of teaching, and anybody who's taught ASL can tell you that probably doesn't sharpen your skills as much as getting your teeth kicked in over and over again by significantly better players.
right.
And so I don't necessarily play as competitively as I used to.
Okay. Do you have someone that you would consider to be like your most played opponent or a regular opponent previously?
Oh, yeah. I mentioned him earlier, Gary Fortenberry and I probably played 150, 200 scenarios amongst us. And then after that, it would just be a lot of the DC conscripts. So Bill Stoppel, Jim Mell, Dave Garvin and I have played a couple of games. I'm an ASL floozy, for lack of a better word. And I'll play anybody just about at any time. And I would prefer to play somebody I've never played before, just like I said, just for the opportunity to meet and socialize and get to know them and have fun, right? I mean, if you've read my Tactical Maxims article, you'll know that I believe that, you can play competitive ASL and not play and not be, try to playing to win is not mutually exclusive with, playing to have fun.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, for some reason, seem to think there is. And I just find that generally, if you think people playing to win is a detriment to the game, what I think you're really running to is a rude player. A player does not know how to handle adversity, and he allows his emotions to get the better of him. And that's not the same as not liking people that are trying to win. I try to win all the time, but I hope you walk away from the game saying, "Hey, I had fun, and I'd like to play again."
Yeah.
We'd agree with that, definitely.
Yeah. We make so many. We were just talking before we started. We make so many mistakes in our games. So, for example, a scenario two episodes ago, we even got the wrong starting side. It's so hard to do anything correct in ASL that if you take it really seriously, you hold yourself up to such a high level of expectation of how to play the game. But this brings me to my next point then about the advice that you've given people and the writing that you do. So we mentioned your blog last time. We're going to talk a bit more about that. Where did that come from, the idea to do that, and how long has that been in production for?
So that's an interesting question, and it's only interesting insofar as that I've written quite a bit, but not all of it ends up in places. For a while I was writing, and I had written, Jackson has shared a couple of my articles on his Hong Kong Wargamer site. Chris Dory had shared a couple of mine on his SITREP report. But for me, part of it goes back to just the slowness of production of the written medium anymore. I mean, I hate to say it, but if you think about the last annual was what? The last journal was 2017, I think now, 5 years ago. And so this print medium has gotten so slow, and there's a question of whether or not is it because they're not getting articles, and so people are going to blogs and they're not getting articles, people have gone to blogs, or why is this? And you see it also with scenario productions, right? Peter Stroif and Chris Mazzi, I think, have gone to their own. You see Chuck Hammond with Hasmo going to their own. I know Fortenberry and I discussed taking all of his stuff off on our own, just because of the production pace. And God bless MMP. I don't know where the hobby would be without him. How much of it's related to COVID and all the things that are going on and everything. But the slowdown is just, I don't know, it's not in keeping with the modern way the world moves today. And then for me, I know Martin had mentioned in one of the previous episodes his appreciation of my bonsai article, the Science of the Bonsai article. And as I communicated to you, Dave, and Martin, if you haven't heard, there is an error in that article. And that's also another genesis of my move to a blog. I've been trying for 12 years now to fix the error that's in that bonsai article, and to the point where I've actually written a blog post, and I'm waiting for permission from MMP to post it. to talk about how to correct that, and then a follow-up blog post that talks about that still conveys the same information I was trying to from the same example, but just does the example a little bit differently. And so what I learned from that is that once it goes into writing, and I give it to somebody else, I don't have control over it. I have none, and so you're stuck with what's out there. Whereas when I put it on my blog, I can update it. I can put a version number in the bottom corner and say, hey, here it is, and here's the fix, and this is how it all works. And without that, you're just kind of stuck. And it's bad because I really love the fact that Martin enjoys the article, but I can't tell Martin how to fix it. I can't tell Martin where I made my mistake, and I'm not there to talk about it. Yeah. And that's one of the inevitable outcomes. I mean, you talked earlier, Dave, about boards being flipped and swapped and played. This game is complex, and the interaction between a rule in A and G and H is so dynamic and so fluid. And then you throw in Q&A and errata that changes over time and understanding. Mistakes in articles are inevitable, and being able to control them and being able to fix them as they become surfaced is, part of what drove me into this blogosphere.
Right.
And then the other thing for me is I don't advertise on my blog. I don't look to generate money. Part of that's because I use Vasil images, and if I did that, I would have to cut them a piece and figure that out and how the fairness goes with that. I don't run Patreons for the same reason. All credit to those people who do those things. I don't have a problem with that. But for me, I just try to make sure that I remain legal with all the things that are going on to the best I can. I know I will with this upcoming prisoner article,
right,
ask for donations, but not for me. The donations I'm going to ask for are going to be for Sam Tyson, mainly because he's looking to instill SSL certs into the ASL scenario players rating system that he runs and hosts that doesn't have SSL certs, and he needs about $250 to do that.
Okay.
So I'll probably beg or solicit donations, but for Sam to put that in there. But.
Okay. That's very good. So we should talk about your upcoming prisoner article. So depending on, we'll probably push this out, I think, after you've gone live with that. We've had a sneak peek. It's an incredible article. I learned something just by skimming reading it. I mean, I honestly, I was shocked to see that you can still take prisoners after no quarter was declared, and I was like, well, okay, if I'm going to get that one tidbit from a scan of the, without reading anything, how much am I going to learn?
Can I add? I was actually walking home reading it on my phone, and I nearly got run over, and I thought, I'm going to put my phone away. I'm going to go home, and I'm going to read it later.
Clearly, it's one of the biggest things I've written in a long time at 21, 22 pages. And, I'd like to think it's well researched because there's 30, 35 footnotes in it. I don't know the exact number, which references Q&A. And then, thanks to Perry and Klaus Malmstrom for answering another dozen Q&As that I asked during the course of this thing on pieces and parts, clarifying Q&As and interactions between rules and old Q&As and new Q&As and version 1 rules and how those all flipped around.
Right.
But it was fun, and it's very interesting. And then, I've had some good help on the proofreading side from Jackson has helped. Andy Hershey has helped me. J.R. Tracy helped me with it. Klaus has had looks at it. And several other folks, Tom Jazabudis and Jazzy and a couple other guys just helped me. The table at the front on the difference between prisoners and unarmed personnel, Michael Sedlacko said, hey, you should fix this into a table, and then provided me back a table on the edit, and then I was like, oh yeah, this makes a lot of sense, and then that got tweaked into the final form you see in there.
Okay.
Because
you said it took, is it 2 months or so to write that article, or?
So for me, I started writing it, I think in early, this is November, October, September. It's like late August, mid to late August is when I started writing it. And I probably have, between research, writing, and different versioning and whatnot, probably close to 125 hours of time invested into it.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time because you have to get the Q&As because the rules aren't good they just aren't good enough. Let's just be honest with ourselves. The A20 rules are just not very well written. So finding all the Q&A that are applicable and bringing them together, and then working with Klaus to find what Q&A I'm missing, because not all of the Q&A that he has is necessarily published, and then trying to find those originators of that Q&A to get permission to use it inside of the articles, and then asking other questions that have arisen, and Perry taking the time to literally answer at least a dozen Q&A that are nowhere else. But in this article, until unless Klaus posts them in his collection. So all that stuff took time and effort to pull together, and then pulling the examples together, putting them into Vassal, pulling them out of Vassal, putting them into GIMP, which is a Photoshop worklight, and editing them there, add bits and pieces to it. All of that stuff, just, the time adds up, and suddenly you're like, oh, wow, that's 100 hours I just crossed.
And what was the inspiration for doing that?
So this particular article came from Perry, because I'd posted on Word online, hey, I've done this. And then I'd been having back and forth discussions with Perry about possibly posting my fix for that Science of the Bonsais article. And I asked him in passing, hey, is there anything you'd like to see? And Perry's response was, I'm always interested in a good prisoner article. And so, that's part of the genesis for this. And then if you've been around any forums or any discussion forums regarding ASL, you've seen an A20 question at least once a week, once a month, for as long as you've been playing ASL. So something to kind of clarify these. And as I say at the top, I hope that, this forms the basis of an A20 rewrite at some point.
Right.
I still have hope that A20 will be rewritten someday in my lifetime, but by pulling this all together and asking clarifications and pieces, I think there might be enough here to, start talking about what it looks like. And then, all the snippets, the pieces of examples are just part of a bigger thing that can be pulled together into a single comprehensive surrender example.
Right. Wow.
When all the pieces involved.
Yeah. So we saw Tom Repetti's, the example of the route example end up in the rule book. Do you see that potentially ended up as well as like part of the electronic rule book and potentially a third edition as well?
I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever see a third edition. A lot of people keep talking about third edition now, and I know Gary Fortenberry used to talk about third edition. But so much would be broken if we went that way. It would almost be like starting over again.
Right.
And I don't even know that I would really appreciate it personally.
Yeah.
But I can see an A20 rewrite taking place. I can see an A20 comprehensive example taking place on surrendering, because there's so many pieces of the surrender rules that aren't necessarily clear, particularly a unit that, doesn't get interdicted in its first hex, but gets interdicted down the line, gets rewound back to where it started at to surrender. And so many people don't realize that.
Right.
And so those kinds of examples are key to understanding rules. And I can see that happening.
That's in the route example, isn't it? I think the Tom Repetti's route examples.
I don't recall if it's in his routing examples or not. And it may be, because it's been such a long time since I read the rule book. Getting back to that competitive part I talked about earlier, it used to be like a yearly event for me for A through D, and I don't think I've read the rule book now in 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
Are there other parts of the rule book that you think are problematic? A20, you mentioned a couple.
I think A20 is the biggest problem, just because so many people would rather declare no quarter than deal with it.
Yeah.
Right. How many times have you just heard people say, "Oh, no quarter, I don't have to look at it," right? I don't have to deal with it. But then, they're trying to figure out how come they can't win this game, because they have to win this building, and the unit that's broken just routed upstairs because it doesn't surrender.
Yeah.
Right. Or that unit routed away that would normally surrender and comes back to be the one thing left holding off in the back of the building. Right. And so that's part of the reason why I write this, right? For players to say, hey, at least after this, if you declare no quarter and you thought about it for a second, then I think I've done my job. Right. And if you haven't thought about it, then maybe I need to be a little bit more clear in the way I go about it.
Well, we definitely have to thank you for that article. It's going to be an incredible resource, I think, for everybody going forward. And if it increases everybody's rules knowledge, that's a great thing. And I hope that's,
you're welcome.
We get that for as many different parts of the game as possible. And it's thanks to people like yourself and, like you said, the supporting cast of everybody that helps you out. And that's good. And I hope that
you can't.
God, sorry.
I say you can't do this without a lot of people to help you edit, because and I try to get people from all levels, new players, intermediate players, and good players to help me, because people's understanding of the rules is different at all those levels and how they interconnect. And it's good to put it in front of some new player, and he's like, I didn't understand that, or I didn't know that. Holy cow! And then, and then a new player who does the same thing, then you're like, okay, now I know I'm onto something, right?
Yeah.
Right.
If an old hand looks and says, I had no clue, like J.R. Tracy, some of the things that he said to me in his comments was like, who knew, right? And so that's when a player of that caliber who is saying, oh wow, I learned something, is to me also a big kick, right? I like to see the old players know it, and I love it when new players know it, and I love it when players come back to me later, like Martin, and when you talked about the Bonsai article, right? That stuff is why I do this. I enjoy listening to other players and their feedback, and I enjoy them when they ask for topics too. I mean, that's where a lot of my topics come from, watching people ask questions and then suggestions. And so I'd say, offer to you, if there's a topic you'd like to see covered, don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll see what I can do.
Is there?
Do you have a self? Go ahead, Martin.
I was going to say, it's interesting how without other people you can't really establish authority, can you? Because however good your understanding of the rules is, you've got to set yourself and say, right, this is correct, or whatever. Even someone like Klaus on his own can't sort of be absolutely certain. It's only by working with a few other people that you can kind of say authoritatively, we're pretty sure this is how the rules are meant to be interpreted.
Yeah, the only person who can operate authoritatively on his own is Perry, and that's because he rules by edict, right?
Yeah.
The rest of us, we have to do the best we can to try to sort through the rules, understand what the intent is. I mean, I keep just out of camera over here, there's a copy of the first edition rules, and I keep those here to be able to compare first edition to second edition, to original Q&A, which in theory was deprecated, and new Q&A, which in theory wasn't, and how those changes carry through those rules to try to understand what the intent was. And sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't interpret that, and that's part of what makes it so possible that that's the space in which I operate, right? Where those nuances aren't necessarily very clear, and trying to sort them out. And that's also why you have these mistakes that can show up, because my assumption could be wrong. A Q&A could prove me completely wrong.
Prisoners
that's
is
another one of the.
Sorry. So prisoners is an interesting area, because it's not often that you think of a scenario and you think, oh, okay, I've got to read the prisoner rules for this one. Like, for example, if it's a lot of half tracks, you're going to dive into that. Was there any particular scenario or situation that kind of has come up because of your kind of wanting to look into more prisoners? Or is there anything, if people want to, I don't know, like kind of dive in deep into a prisoner scenario, is there anything that springs to mind as a scenario that focuses more on prisoners than the average scenario?
Well, anytime you're playing with conscripts with an ELR1, you have a very high propensity for prisoners, right?
Right.
Because disrupted units surrender adjacent right away, and so you've got all kinds of issues with that, and they just show up everywhere, right? I mean, anytime you got a unit surrounded and failure to no court, right? To eliminate for failure to rout, its first option is always to surrender. And so there's not a scenario that goes by where you probably couldn't take a prisoner. I mean, the opportunities to not take prisoners are probably far fewer than opportunities to take prisoners in scenarios. I mean, if you've played scenario ASL for a while yourselves, by now you know as well as I do, more units are eliminated for failure to rout than are ever been eliminated by KIA.
Yep.
And every one of those failure to rout opportunities is an opportunity to take prisoners. So now the question is, how do you deal with them? What can they do with them? How do you transfer them? How do they rearm? How do they escape? How does it affect the VC? You see in some of the other articles, my ASL maxims, I talk about the victory conditions and understanding what exactly that means. It's not enough to say, oh, go collect these 4 buildings. You have to know what it means to take those 4 buildings. How do I get it? And I think one of the articles that I've got in the back of my brain is actually talking about how to read the victory condition rules, because I think they're in an effort to compact those rules on victory conditions. They put a bunch of these virgules, these slashes that say hex building, hex and or building and or location and or I forget what the other one is, but they really should have been expanded into 4 separate rules rather than one rule that they tried to import it in. And they define that virgule, the slash character, as and or in the index, but what they really mean there is one instance. Like this rule is read with the first thing in those separated by those virgules as once, and then read again with the second thing, and read again with the third thing, and read again with the fourth thing.
Right.
And it really becomes challenging for folks. But you have to know those things, right?
Yeah.
It's not enough to say control that bridge. Well, what does it mean to say to control the bridge? Do I control the location underneath it? Do I control the bridge on top of it?
Yeah.
Right?
Does the definition of the slash include and slash or is it an and comma or? Does it go a bit recursive?
And it's so that it is recursive, right?
Right.
And it's kind of funny because it says slash equal and slash or, right? So even the definition says and or or maybe that's what it'd be and or. Right? And so it's just kind of a weird thing. And then when people say and slash or, they're really saying and slash, because the slash itself technically means and or.
Right.
I have to say, actually,
funny.
Your good friend Gary Fortenberry has written some of the victory conditions that have totally tangled my brain, and his are precise and accurate when you're eventually able to untangle them. But it's an intelligent mind that wrote those, and I struggle.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I don't take ownership of all of them because Gary obviously is the final arbiter of just about anything he ever says, and he uses his paces. But I have had a lot of influence on him on some of the stuff that he does. He and I were oftentimes the primary play tester on everything. And generally speaking, Gary kept his own counsel on what went in and what didn't go into his own scenarios. And he's such a good player himself that he had a really great eye for determining what was interesting and what had, potential to be a good scenario. And I think he's done a pretty good job.
We think
If you ask him, the only scenario that he would ever take back would be Sat Syria Kai, I think it's called. And that's because the last minute playtester talked him into eliminating one Japanese leader. And if you add that Japanese leader back in, then it's a cracker of a scenario. But without it, it's pretty much a Japanese hose.
Wow. We know, like out of all the kind of styles of scenario designers, a Fortenberry kind of style scenario stands out for its victory conditions and that kind of theme. Yes. It must have been hard work playtesting a lot of those, and you must have felt like it was quite a tricky path.
Well, it's hard to try to untangle them because there is some stuff that goes into them. But, the harder part is just, getting beaten every time. Well, Gary, this is an unbalanced dog. Okay, let's flip it around. Bang, got beat again. Well, I guess it's not. All right. So that's the part that but it's a learning experience, right? I can tell you the first time I ever beat Gary, and I was like, holy shit, I finally beat Gary. It didn't happen very often, but, I could play him pretty hard, and I could beat him.
Did he rip?
But it wasn't something I did often.
Did he rip that scenario up and it never got published? Was that the?
No. That was actually we were playing. It was a Bounding Fire production or a Schwerpunkt. I can't remember what it was.
Right.
But I beat him in it, and and it was one of those 8.2 where it turns out that one of the buildings that I controlled I didn't need to control or something back and vice versa. But I was like, hey, screw that! I walked away from the table for the win, so I won it.
So, favorite scenarios and things like this. What anything that stands out as a scenario that you'd always play again?
There's very few scenarios that I wouldn't play again. Generally speaking, I only play scenarios that have great reputations to begin with now because I'm not playing as much as I used to. So, if I look at something and it's on the Albany playlist, then there's a pretty good chance I've played it or will play it. And if I've played it, I probably would play it again. Steve does such a great job curating that list and taking care of it that it's hard not to like what's on it. I would say the same for the Copenhagen guys.
Right.
One of my favorite scenarios of all time that I will play anytime bar none is Polish Requiem, although I prefer it as published originally by Friendly Fire, and they did it. They had a mistake in their original version that had the French FT-17s had both CMGs and main armaments, and the real tank only had one or the other. and those were errata counters. But I think that version is more balanced than the one that ended up in MMP's Best of Friends.
Wow. It's incredible that you talk about that being a balanced swing, where a lot of people would think it's like an extra tank or an extra 2 tanks or something, that level. But if a tank or if a scenario is that balanced to the point of an extra CMG or something, it seems to be fairly close.
Sorry, I disconnected there.
No problems.
I was like, "What happened?" My name. I was like, "That ain't good." No. So part of the thing
We've lost
with,
your camera.
let me turn it back on here. See, video.
Okay.
There we go. I don't see your cameras, but I don't need to see your mugs.
We're here. Okay.
Yeah, I believe you. So the thing with that scenario is the replacement for the CMG firepower they put in there were, I think, 2 squads. And so, whereas those FT-17s, if you broke them, they don't rally, right? Whereas those 2 squads on that side can rally, and they're harder to eliminate and harder to maneuver. And in fact, those FT-17s with their 5 movement factors, 1 to start, 1 to stop, it really can only go 3 hexes if they don't have to change covered arc, right? Whereas those squads have a lot more maneuverability and ability to get around. So I think the original version was a little bit more balanced, and that is one of those scenarios that I actually beat Gary in, I think, once or twice as the defender. And I have a pretty good lockdown defense on that version, whereas with the new version, so not quite as effective.
Right. So you prefer early war stuff, or it doesn't matter at all?
It doesn't matter. I'm a huge fan of just about any ASL. I don't play a lot of night scenarios, and my love of campaign games is long established, and I say that sort of tongue in cheek because I don't like campaign games at all. For me, that's 300 turns of the same thing, and I just don't have any love of them. And most of them end up being Sitzkriegs on one side or the other. Most of them end up, I kick your teeth in until you kick my teeth in, and I just don't find them fascinating. But for those that do, I more power to them. I buy them, for the boards and the equipments and whatnot, but I don't think I've ever played much more than 1 or 2 turns of a campaign game, and that includes Red Barricades, which makes me a pariah.
It's a fair point. You've been around ever since I've known ASL, so I remember. I think the mailing list, you were fairly active on the mailing list. Is that right?
No, I didn't. I never really was on the mailing list. That predated my time.
Okay.
But it is one of the things that concerns me about the ASL scene right now. I mean, if you think about the mailing list, when it was all we had, we were all there.
Yep.
And nowadays we're split into 3 different Discords. There's Roar, there's the ASL Scenario Archive. There's 3, 4, 5 Facebook groups. We're seeing, in some ways, we're seeing Game Squad sort of diminish or demise as it goes through its sale process again and whatnot. And this fracturing of the community to all these different sites is a little bit worrisome to me. Only because it's hard, right? It makes it harder to find other players. It makes it harder to communicate. It makes it harder to form community. I mean, each of these communities have their own standards and their own practices, and some of that's for the better and some of that's for the worst. But I don't know. We'll see how it works out.
Yeah. So
it doesn't help. I added just another ASL publishing site, so it's not like I'm not guilty of the fracturing myself.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because when something gets very, very big, you think of like a football team or something like that, there are hundreds of communities, and it's all fine because it goes through a particular process. And ASL feels like it's gone through its process of growth, and maybe it's shrinking a little bit now in terms of, the players are getting older. But it is a difficult thing to know whether we'll bring players back into a centralized place or whether they'll just be areas, like you say, Discord and Facebook are very active.
So like I had offered to run a ASL calendar for tournaments. I was like, I'll just put a calendar up on my website. I'll, allow people who run tournaments to send me a note. I'll put the calendar app up. I'll put there. You give me a link to your tournament. I'll give you a link out to your tournament and the whole thing. Only to find out Dave Garvin runs a Facebook group that's dedicated to just that.
Right.
And I've been around the community, and I know, I don't know how many people I know who play ASL all around the country. My wife always marvels that we go places And I'm like, oh yeah, I know Bob. He plays ASL. Let's go see if we can find him to hook us up someplace, right? And I didn't have any idea this even existed. And so, if I don't know it exists, that's not to say that I'm, this every ASL player, but if I don't know it exists and I'm as plugged in as I am, how many people didn't know it existed? And so that's the fracturing that worries me, this inability for one person to be able to go one place and say, I want to play ASL this weekend, what's going on?
Yeah. And we're also, there's many of us are kind of one-man bands. You look at Mark Pictures' site and, my site to the extent, the Raw site. When we're no longer active, for whatever reason, and we're all getting older, we're all kind of, there is going to be a kind of a drop off of the cliff, isn't there, of some sites and some resources. So I guess it's a tricky thing to figure out how to persevere and to keep those things going.
Yeah, there's a part of me as well. I mean, so for me, I've paid for my website for 3 years and everything, and that was because it was cheaper to do it, right? It was $100 American dollars to put it up for 1 year, and it was $105 to do it for 3 years. I'm not a mathematician, and I certainly don't claim to be, an economist or anything, but 105 for 3 seemed a lot better deal than 100 for 1. And so I paid for the full 3 years, and so that's my plan for now is those 3. And I've toyed with the idea of reaching out to other people I know that are authoring, that want to author, and offering them an opportunity to publish by creating accounts for them on my site as authorship accounts, which would let them publish as they wish. My only requirement for that would be is that I would be the final editor, just so I could make sure that the content that you were posting was within some limited sort of guidelines, right? I don't, I'm not trying to control your content, but at the same time, if you're going to post about Magic the Gathering, you can go post it someplace else.
Sure.
Right. And I've toyed with that idea, and I've talked to a couple of people about it if they're interested. But most of those guys that are writing articles are thinking about writing for themselves in their own spaces, which gets back to some of that fracturing. And I don't blame them. I don't blame folks for that. Some folks have their own spaces because, like I said, for me, I'm not in this for money, so there's no ads on my site. I don't ask for donations or anything like that. I'm just trying to give back to the community that's given me so much. And if somebody wants to come and write with me, then that's what they would have to be willing to do as well. And I don't grudge anybody for not doing the same, right?
It kind of almost goes back to full circle about the the in print. For example, if MMP pick up one of your articles or Bound in Fire or Le Frontier, it's there forever then, and players have always got access to it, which is perhaps the one big strength for that kind of publishing.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about that, and I don't, but that comes with a two-edged sword, right? Because it's there, and it's stuck in time. Whereas, most of the articles that I've posted on my website have had changes even in the short time that I've been around them, because somebody will reach out and say, hey, did you think about this? And a lot of times I've thought about it, but the words that I put on paper may not convey the intention as clearly as I want. Just yesterday, somebody reached out about the guns as targets, and we talked about the gun shield DRM and when they applied and when they didn't, and I wasn't as precise in my language as I want, so I made a small change to clean up the precision on the language, and then I can roll the version number in the bottom right corner, and now everybody knows what version I'm on, and I can't do that in a print article. There's just version 1.0, and that's it. There's no fixing that, and there's no making people aware of the mistake or offering them the clarification of the words. Even in the Bonsai article, one of the criticisms that came back to that one was there's more than one. I called it baseline. There's this isn't all the baselines. And I'm like, well, I didn't mean for it to be all the baselines. I just meant for it to be some of the ones that I considered for the purposes of this article to demonstrate that there's more than one, and you just have to pick one, right? And so some people criticize on that, and that's fine. They're welcome to criticize. It is what it is. But and so that's one of the things that I try to clarify in this, hopefully to be released Bonsai article is I didn't mean for it to be all. My language wasn't precise enough at the time, and the criticism was fair. And here's how I would fix it.
Do you find on the whole that ASL players are reasonable in their criticism of mistakes and things like that, or do you think they demand a very high level of accuracy?
I think there's a demand for a high level of accuracy, but I also think that for the most part, people are fair in their criticisms. Like I said, you have to expect that you're going to make mistakes. I think this is one of the reasons why you don't see many rules articles, because you're opening yourself up to criticism. It's easy to write tactics because tactics are just one of 1,000 choices, right? Whereas the rules are the rules, and they're pretty much a straitjacket. And if you put it on wrong, everybody knows you've messed the buttons up. And so you take that going into it. It gets a little harsh depending on personalities. I mean, generally speaking, stop me if you didn't know this, but there are a lot of very strong personalities in ASL. And if you run afoul of some of those personalities, I mean, I've had some really passion-filled arguments with folks about bypass and how sleaze freeze is done correctly and incorrectly, and discussions on the rules that well, you're just reading the rules wrong. Well, no, I've submitted to Perry and I've got the rule right here. Well, Perry's wrong too. And so so those kinds of things can happen, right? I mean, that's the nature of where we are. And if anybody who's been around going back to the mailing list knows that those elbows can get out when you have those strong personalities. And admittedly, I think I can be a strong personality as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so it's part of the deal, I think.
Jim, I was wondering, I mean, your blog, they're all about rules, aren't they? Most of it's about rules, not quite all of it. Have you thought about doing sort of tactical discussion as well?
So I have one of the things I just did today is I wrote a article. Matt Shostak has an upcoming article on a particular scenario in Bonsai. And so he asked me to write a tactical article. So I wrote the one article I wrote on my ASL maxims, which talks about how I break down scenarios and make my decisions. And so I'm going to apply that ASL maxims to this scenario with Matt Shostak. Shostak's going to do one look based on how he looks at it. I'm doing one look how I base it on how I look at it. I'm going to provide you a defensive setup and then sort of how I react in the first couple of turns. And that's about as far as you can go, right? Really. In your planning, because a lot, the enemy gets a say, right? Isn't that what they always say? The enemy gets a say too. And so you have to kind of be willing to play off of him. And so I am doing more of those. It's my intent to do more of those. I played a recent game of Hasmo 4, which was, what is it, New Kids in Town or the Crazy Kids or something like that. I'm trying to reach out to Robert Hammond and ask him, or Chuck Hammond, and ask him about will he have a discussion with me about it, because I have some ideas on it, but my game only lasted one turn talking about dice. My opponent rolled smoke, got it, rolled smoke, didn't get it, rolled smoke, generated my sniper. My sniper was a 1, stun recall his tank. He moves 1 unit into a 6-3. I roll a 2 and kill that unit. It's to my final fire, first shot against one of his 2 remaining AFEs. I call for APCR, roll 1-1, burn that one. And then with the rate shot, I call for APCR, roll a 1-1 and burn that one. And at that point, his PMC was cracked and said, I don't think I can go any further. So I'd like to talk to Chuck about it just to see how, what his thoughts are on it and what my approach was, because I just need a way to validate it. Because I didn't get to play it so far. Basically, my opponent set up, he moved a couple of his units around. I've destroyed a couple of his tanks. I neutralized his kill stack with a burning tank in its hex. There was just all kinds of badness from his perspective. And so he just said, I just don't think I can go any further. And frankly, I think he could have made a challenging battle of it, because his tanks really just were there to kind of help his infantry close. And his infantry had managed to close probably as far as they could hope to close on the first turn. But I don't blame him from walking away from it, because he does need his tanks to do some of the heavy lifting, and they just don't exist anymore.
Was that a tournament game?
2 of them are burning. No, it was just a game we were playing to play. I mean, so I don't want to out him, but I will tell you at Copenhagen we played a game, and he did the same to me. Where on the first 2 turns, I'm playing this scenario, and my squads are coming across the ground, and he K-slashed, casually reduced, I think 6 or 7 of my 11 initial squads just flat out on K slashes, right?
Wow.
So it's like, and the half that's left is broken. So I mean, it was just payback, but you know, we've all been on the other side of that dice.
We have.
On
We
more
have.
than one occasion.
That's very true. It's very true. So
But it is my intent to write more tactical based articles.
Right.
But it's funny because, you know, the rules based article, I can see the traffic to my site every day. That's one of the nice things about having it. I can tell you how many people hit, what they're looking at, and what's going on. And generally, the tactics articles haven't been as well received as the rules based articles are. And so there's not as many downloads of the PDFs. There's not as many hits on the actual sites. And so I'm going to try 1 or 2 more to see how well they continue, and it'll just depend on the feedback. Everybody needs to understand the rules, but generally only newer players are interested in tactics. And so writing about tactics sort of limits the field of people that are willing to look. We'll see how it goes. You know, I'm not expecting, you know, a New York Times critically acclaimed bestseller, but writing for 10 people isn't nearly as fun for me as writing for 400 or 500.
do you see yourself doing anything other than writing? Do you see yourself getting into video production or anything like that?
I have a face made for radio.
That's, if we can make it work,
So
anyone can.
yeah, well, you're a lot more handsome than me. You've got more groupies than I do. No, I don't see me doing any video production. I mean, I wouldn't mind playing, you know, much like Stuart does with his with some of his stuff, playing ASL online and talking through it and having discussions. But I don't know. It's just it's never really been my thing. I have OBS and I can do the capturing and, you know, all the stuff that's out there. It's just not something that I think I'm interested in doing.
When we look at what Martin's done with the tabletop talks and the introduction to tanks and things like that, those are, I would say, Martin's fair to say, vastly more popular than what we do like with this. There's a lot more demand, I think. And I just wondered if, like, you've ever thought about doing like a companion video to your rules section. So, for example, you know, even going through and breaking down your rules in a video style as a companion.
Do you know Derek Ritter does these really well, actually? Derek Ritter goes through rules you perhaps don't use all the day, parachute landing and things like that, and does it very, very well.
Yeah, and I think, and again, there's a lot of, I like them. I think they're great there. But again, it gets back to the print medium, right? I mean, how do you correct mistakes in those?
Sure. If you take a leaf out of our book, just leave it.
They're going to occur, right? Yeah, but that's my point, right? They're going to occur, and when you're trying to write authoritative on rules, those mistakes matter.
Yeah.
But when it comes to tactics, and tactics are something that change, right? Tactics are something that there's no one way to say that you're right or you're wrong. I mean, even in my initial Maxims article, I say right up front, right? Just because you're doing it and I air quote it the wrong way doesn't mean it doesn't work. You know, because the dice get a say. I've done everything right in a game, laid out the perfect game. I mean, I played Danny Steinhagen. I was in his head. It's like I read his book. He brings all of his tanks on. He parks them right between 2 Roth 3 AT guns that kill on an 11, right? And I 6-6 the first one, 6-6 the second one, 6 the repair, 6 the repair, and it was game over, right?
Well played.
And so there's nothing you can do. I mean, you can do everything right, and the dice still get a say.
Yeah.
And so even the right way can work. It can fail, and even the wrong way can work.
And it's funny, actually, you can do the wrong thing and be lucky with the dice, and everyone thinks you're a great player, kind of thing. Looks
Yes.
well, yeah, absolute moment of glory, but actually you weren't doing. You didn't make a good move at all.
Yeah, tell me this has never happened to you. I move my unit here. Oh, that's great. That's a 6 down 3. I roll a 2 check. You know, HOB, hero, bonsai. Oh, that 2 check generates your sniper. Sniper pops right down in the kill stack and breaks everything, right? I mean, only in ASL can a guy blunder and come out better for it. Right? With your tank stunned and recalled, and his guy sitting there with a hero and fanatic. You know. It's the one thing about ASL that drives me crazy is the stuff that you just can't control. And everybody always says, well, the dice even out. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know that I buy that. I seem to be on the wrong end of those dice a lot.
Do you see yourself as an unlucky player?
Well, I would let Doug Shepard answer that for me. Doug Shepard has seen me play quite a bit, and he's one of the guys that said, I mean, I'll paraphrase him because I don't know the exact quote, but he has said he's never seen somebody be as situationally unlucky as me. I don't know if there's truth to that or not truth to that. Gary Trezza and I used to play quite a bit, and Trezza used to say he would never resign against for me because somewhere along the way my dice would get in the game, allow a critical boxcar in a close combat, which would let one of his squads pop free from a close combat and go into my rear area and capture all the buildings that I'd just gone to all the trouble taking.
Right.
He's like, it happens to you every time. He's like, I don't know what happened. In his New York, I don't know what happens, man. It's just like every time we play, this kind of crap happens. Right? And so I don't know that I'm unlucky. I just feels like it.
Are you looking forward to anything in particular coming out for ASL Manila or anything like that? Is it something you'd be looking for?
So I'm pretty much not paying too much attention. I just buy it out of reflex. I am looking forward to getting my copy of the latest Hasmos because I think those guys have done a pretty good job on those. I would like to see, and this comes back to something you guys talked about last week, the Chapter H rule book and the pocket book. Martin, as nice as it is to take your book with you to tournaments, the reason why I use the electronic rule book is because there's a Chapter H in it. Without it, you really can't play, right? And so it's a bit of a problem. But when MMP puts out the pocket Chapter H to go with it, I will probably myself go back to a paper book, just for consistency. I do like my electronic, so I don't use MMP's electronic rulebook. I use my own that I've worked on for a long time, so it's complete A through Z. Primarily also because mine's got all the errata plugged into it, and all the Q&As are also cross-linked and whatnot. And so that's the one that it's hard to put that one down because I don't have to think about what's Q&A. I've got a little note on the side that says where it came from, what this insert was, and the actual text itself looks correct.
Yeah, that's something. Do you think that the MMP could have done better with the electronic rulebook? Incorporate the Q&A somehow.
So MMP, not the Q&A. I wish they would have plugged in the errata. And MMP originally started doing with the rulebook that I had because I'd shared it with Chaz and a couple of other folks. And the guy who was originally starting the rulebook, Arnie Shemlo, I think Shemlo was doing it. He was taking what essentially was my rulebook and turning it into a PDF format, and it had all the pieces and parts. But then, like so much that MMP does, it's volunteers that are adding to it, people that are doing it in their own time, and then they get some sort of a deal on the other side of it. And so, Arnie his life got in the way. He found another job. He moved away. He wasn't interested in doing it. And then they went down the path that they went now, which, it's a good rulebook. I don't have it because I have a better one. And I wish they had incorporated, if nothing else, just the errata would have made it a lot different. But even now, you're stuck with the rule book. And if you've looked at all the rules around defensive first fire, I mean, most of those have been modified over the years. In different bits and pieces. The intensive fire rules have been modified over the years. Just bits and parts like that, and it's just, I don't know, it's unfair. It's unfortunate, but again, that's not a criticism of MMP. I think MMP does a fantastic job.
Yep.
And I'm really appreciative of what they do.
Yeah.
And it's easy for me to sit here on the sidelines with no skin in the game to say, well, just go fix it, right? And I try to make sure people understand that I'm not trying to suggest that they do. I wish they had, but if you don't do it, then that's up to them. That's their company, not mine.
Yeah. That came up I was at a tournament this weekend, and the intensive fire in the defensive final fire part came up as a question, and trying to find, we know the rules kind of support the non-fire, non-adjacent units and things like this, but trying to find that in the rules is quite tricky. And there was a thread, and I think it was a 270 post thread, just argument. I think it was a Board Game Geek one, I think, rather than it may have been a GameSquad one. But it
probably was a GameSquad, because I can remember that big discussion that took place there leading up to. I mean, there was a poll at the top of that thread, if I'm not mistaken, and in that thread, there was 4 different three different options that were offered on when you could possibly intensify or not. And 50% was for option A, 25% was for option B, and 25% was for option C.
Right.
And it was like this weird space where, depending on who you played, you had different rules in play. And it was just hard to understand it.
Very much like the bridge TEM. We had like for, was it a year or so, we had that, it was -3 on a bridge and then it was -2 and, you know, all this kind of crazy.
Yeah, well, part of that was because I think the QRDC said something about a -1, but it meant -1 down the bridge length or something. And so there was some back and forth on that. So for a very short period of time, yes, we had that -3 and then it went back to -2. Frankly, I was okay with it being -3. I mean, I've seen a bridge too far, those boys running across the bridge. I mean, they got chopped up, right? So, I mean, anybody who watched that recent movie on the Scheldt with those guys running across the causeway, right? My -3 seemed pretty reasonable to me. I doubt those guys laying on the ground there were like saying, was that -3 or -2? They were just looking for a hole to dig into.
Yeah, it's very impressive. So, what's next for you in terms of your next venture? You're going to be doing more ASL travel. What's the plan?
So for me, I'm going back to Albany to play in the Albany tournament in December. And then my wife and I are going to spend the rest of the year, the rest of the month and the holidays back in the U.S. It'll be our first time home in like 2 years. So we're going to go back and spend some time with our daughters and whatnot. I'm trying to get some articles scheduled and posted to come out during that period of time so I don't have to worry about it. I've been thinking about writing a scenario pack. For me, one of my favorite scenarios is meeting engagements. So I've got a couple of books with different topics on which have meeting engagements of combined arms armies, both early in the war. So it gives you opportunity for Russians and Germans playing one another, Russians and Poles, Germans and Poles, Germans and French, and then late war Soviet Germans and whatnot. And then a couple of SRs that I think, SSRs that I think will make it more interesting. The myth of the six Shermans against one Tiger, to me, the Tiger's tough to kill, but I don't think, the literature supports a 6-to-1 ratio, partly because ASL is tabletop flat. And I think there's a couple of SSRs that I think you could introduce that would make the Shermans more survivable. So we're going to try those and see how they play out. I've got a list of articles someplace on my Google Docs of 6, 8, 10 article ideas that I probably plan on doing in the near future. Finalizing my prisoner article obviously is going to be in the near term. But after that, it'll just be traveling around playing ASL, right? With places and things I've never been to. I've never played ASL in London or in England.
Well, you've got a game.
I want to go to intensive. Yeah, I want to go to intensive fire. I want to go to double one. I'm going to try to get to. Yeah, I'm going to try to get to both next year.
That'd be great.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to go to Italia ASL and play some of the Italian ASL stuff, right? And do that. I want to get to Grenadier. I want to try to get up to Henny Vandersalm's place and see if Henny and I can at least just play a game and call it, Arnhem, because Arnhem is no longer there. The last chance I got to go to Arnhem, I couldn't go, right? And it's no more. So I'd like to get up and go walk the battlefield in Arnhem. I'm trying to get up to Friendly Fire. I know they had one just 2 weeks ago, but I don't know if it was the ASL Friendly Fire or the get together and play other games Friendly Fire. So I'm trying to do that. I'm going to Supporting Fire week after next in Sweden. Those are my immediate goals. Maybe find some ASL down in the Iberian Peninsula in France or in Spain.
Wow.
And then after that, I'll be here for another 2 years and we'll go back home to the U.S. I would love to go to the Texas team tournaments again. It is my second favorite tournament in the world, second only to ASLOC. Rick Renish does a fantastic job with that tournament. The food is great because you're right in Texas, and if you like barbecue, you are in the heart of Texas barbecue, and it is amazing. You can walk away from there a good 10, 15 pounds heavy if you're not careful. Those are large portions even by American standards. And if anybody's ever been to the U.S. and seen an American portion, and then there's a Texas portion. but the tournament that he does there is so well done, so well done. His Major Johnson tournament is just phenomenally done. You can win the Major Johnson tournament and be 0-13.
Okay.
Right? No wins and 13 losses. And it comes down to what he calls the most ASL. And Rick has this formula that's based on the number of counters and the types of counters and the number of turns around the board. And this whole math spits out. And so your 6-turn scenario is worth 2,000 points. And it gets quite hairy in the competition. I mean, people are competing for that almost as strongly for the 10-3 Major Johnson as they are for the 9-2 tournament winner. And I've won the 9-2 tournament winner down there, and I can tell you I came really close to winning the Major Johnson at the same time, and I almost threw away my tournament saying, "No, what? I'm going after the Major Johnson because I want the Major Johnson." Right? And so the way he does that is just amazing. He does this ferocity fest, which everybody plays. He picks a scenario, he throws a bunch of style points. Kill a guy with a DC, it's worth 5 points. Kill a guy in close combat, it's worth 10, different things like that. And at the end, you have points and, oh yeah, there's 5 points for winning the scenario. Right? So it's about doing these weird, almost like bucket list items that we all play in ASL that we wanted to see happen. And then all the side A are trying to score the most points, and all the side B are trying to score the most points. And the winner of what he calls Ferocity Fest is the side A that scored the most points wins one, and the side B that scores the most points wins the other half of the bracket. And it's just, again, you don't have to win the scenario, right? Winning the scenario is only worth 5 points.
Yeah.
But killing this tank in CC with a tank hunter hero is worth 30 points. So that's what I'm going to be doing. Right, and so it's such a brilliant way to do it because you don't get into the tournament, lose the first round, and say, oh ho hum, I'm just here to play now, right? Yeah. There's still more going on, and then there's the team aspect of it where he divides everything up. Everybody gets divided into a team, and the teams are 3 to 4 depending on how many people are there, and then everybody on your team who wins is a +1 to the team, and everybody who loses is a -1, and at the end of the week is who has the best. And generally, I mean, the year I won the tournament, my team also won the team tournament, and that's kind of what you'd expect. And I think we were like +3.
Oh wow!
Right, I went 9-0, and my team was +3.
That sounds like the US versus the rest of the world, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. But the point is that it mattered somewhere along the way there that somebody didn't lose as many, right? Or didn't, and they're rooting for you to continue on because there's a neat little prize at the other end of that for them. So he just does such a great job keeping everybody invested and keeping everybody interested in what's going on inside of the tournament. And that it's just so well done. It is just so well done. There's always something to be playing for if that's what you're there for, right? And if you're just there to play with friends and have fun, then that's fine too. But if you're there for the tournament aspect of it and playing in some form of a competition, and he just does a great job keeping everybody involved. And I wish more people did that.
Yeah,
because it is really well done.
Sounds really good, really good. Jim, you're always welcome over here to have a game. We'd love to have a game with you at some point. If you're in the UK, give us a shout. We'll.
As I said, I'll be in London this weekend, but
so this is the one we get. I can't do. Maybe Martin. I don't know. But
I'm free.
There you go. Okay.
I don't think I can pull it off because my wife is going to be with me. We're going to make a bit of a holiday of it through Sunday, and then I'm coming back to Stuttgart on Sunday morning, and I mentioned possibly playing Derek Cox with some ASL on Saturday while we're there. My wife gave me the side eye and said that was no.
She didn't have a 3-player scenario in mind, then it wasn't.
No. She was like, we've got lots of other things we're going to do. Derek and his spouse and I, my wife and I, are going to get together for lunch.
Okay.
Which is much more palatable to my wife. Derek and I have had some real cracker games of ASL at ASLOC, so I kind of wish we'd had a chance to play. But there's always double one next year.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, it's been excellent talking to you. Really appreciate it. Your blogs, your useful advice, your activity on the forums is amazing as well. We, the ASL community is a better place with you. So, from our perspective, thank you for everything you've done. And I hope we get a game at some point. That's.
I'm sure we will. Yeah. Double one, perhaps, or Intensive Fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, either one. If you're there and I'm there, just give me a shout. I mean, I don't really care about the main tournaments anymore. I'd rather play people that are more interested in playing. So just, let's pull about a game.
That's brilliant. Okay, well, look,
And thanks for having me.
thank
I
you very
appreciate it.
much. Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Okay, so thank you to Jim for being a great guy to have a chat with, and I hope you found some of that interesting. It's always good to talk to a fellow ASL player. I've seen he's been in London this weekend. I think he's been in Wembley. He went to. He's been to all kinds of fun stuff. So he's been enjoying himself, and so hopefully you and I will get to give him a game at some point. I know I couldn't this weekend, and you were busy, but we'll do that. Other than that, Martin, anything else from you?
No, I think we're very close. I mean, we obviously are both off to the tournament, and we're going to be talking about that probably next time.
Yep.
I suspect. How
Yep.
we got on. Maybe we'll take some pictures and share them with everyone.
Definitely. In the meantime, thanks everyone. Thanks for your patronage. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your scenario suggestions. If you have any suggestions of something we can play live, let us know. If you want a coffee cup, give me a shout, and we can get that sorted out for you. In the end, I think we're all getting excited about Blackpool, and that's what we're all focused on now, isn't it?
I'm off to pack my counters now.
Brilliant.
Yeah, put them in the boot ready.
Excellent. Okay, well, Martin, I'll see you on Friday at Blackpool, and everybody else will see you in a week or so's time. Until then,
Bye bye.
bye bye.